You're welcome to raise your hand using the raise hand feature or use chat, and we're all pretty conversational in the chat. If you have performance issues, maybe try closing some apps and windows, but we haven't had too many of those lately. And again, ask a question at any time. So what are we going to learn here today? And I'm glad to see we still have some additional people joining the meeting. What are we going to do? We are going to talk about what an integrated schedule is and why it's useful and how to use one. We'll talk a little bit about what information you need to build a good integrated schedule. And we'll talk a little bit about, why it's important and why you might want to have a schedule. And I wanted to take a moment here to let you all know that we here at the OCIO and in the community of practice are tool agnostic, which means if you like to do your project planning with Post-it notes or in Microsoft Project or in Access or Excel or Word or Smartsheet or Lucid Sheet or any of the other portfolio management tools that are out there, great, you do that. This is our first presentation on integrated scheduling, so we've tried to keep it simple, but also we're going to give you some ideas for a level 201 study course if you're motivated to pursue some of these ideas further. Right or wrong way to do this. So if you have a method that allows you to know your critical path and reliably hit your dates, and you don't do anything that we talked to you about today, that's all fine. Our goal was to present the basics and give you a roadmap. It's certainly not our goal that anyone feel judged or criticized here today or have any fear of missing out. But if you do spot an idea that you're not using and you think could be useful to you, then we consider that a win, and we just encourage some positive dialogue here today. Our agenda, per usual, is we have welcomed you, and now we are going to give you an overview of the agenda. Most of today is filled up with presentation, Q&A, a couple of engagement quizzes or opportunities to make sure you're all awake or give you a chance to be awake for a moment. But please enjoy your lunch and just join us here today. The other camera on individual that you see here at the top of your screen should be Puneet Agrawal, and he is going to have a moment in the spotlight here today to show you how he builds a work plan and how integrated work plans can look different and come together but still serve you well as a mechanism for knowing your critical path. And then, of course, if we have time, we'll do some Q&A. So what is, and let me pause here before I jump right into the session. Anybody have anything to comment on agenda or housekeeping before we get started?
Heads up, everyone. This session is being recorded and will be made available on the OCIO website.
Thank you for that. These are recorded and available later, so you can forward them to your friends and significant others, and they can all benefit from a little bit of knowledge sharing here. So let's talk about what an integrated schedule is. And this is just to make sure we are all starting from the same baseline of knowledge. An integrated schedule is a project schedule, again, in any tool that describes your entire project scope and activities from all required trades are included. I left the word trades in there because I thought it was interesting to think about the different subplans or components of a master schedule that you might have that are essentially, represent different trades. So it's an interesting word. We can play with it later. Activities in a work plan theoretically should be fully linked, reflecting dependencies and constraints. So if task A needs to be done before task B can start, we hook those up, right? Integration management, when it comes to a work plan, requires the ability to evaluate resources, make trade-offs, and deal with competing activities. And of course, knowing how all of the activities fit together is really essential to being able to manage a project if you're a project manager. And if we don't do it right, it leads to catastrophic failure, but also to minor slippages, and it's not fun to not have control of your schedule anymore. So we're going to talk about the impact of that a little bit more later too. Somebody maybe needs to go on mute. Okay. So this is a fun, colorful slide, but what I'd like to share with you here is sort of a visual depiction of what an integrated master schedule means. So on the left, you have your trades essentially, or your subject matter areas. You've got project management tasks, people readiness tasks, IT team, maybe some testing, maybe some infrastructure, security access, and then you've got vendors almost always, right? That you're working with as well. An integrated schedule could look like one big work plan with all the tasks, or it could look like one work plan with milestones from other plans, or it could be one work plan with links to other plans. So in the middle example, where you might incorporate milestones from other plans, maybe you input those manually, and then you give feedback back to your vendor or whoever owns that sub plan. In the example on the right, you'd have one work plan with links to other plans. And in some cases, those can be automated, right? So that's something that could happen as well. Another option that's not even on this slide, and I know a lot of people use, is a Kanban board, where you would have 3 columns: to do, doing, and done. I'm curious, though, at this moment in time, if any of you have experience with integrated scheduling and you don't see a method for doing that you've used in the past on this slide, and maybe you'd like to share it with the group. Anyone? Sorry, I'm texting my husband to lock the dog inside because he is stalking my gardeners outside and they are terrified. I'm so sorry. Okay, back to our normally scheduled plan. Good. I'm glad that most of you feel like an integrated schedule is, we've depicted it reasonably well on that slide. So why do we use integrated schedules, right? We use them as project managers for planning, measuring, and tracking. That involves their interdependencies and all their resources and participants across disciplines and work streams. But more importantly, it is a tool that allows us to analyze the impact of delays on key activities, to avoid schedule risks, to make sure your dates, you go to a steering committee and you say, we're going to go live on January 1st. You want to make sure that that date is based on something. And then also your work plan can help you do some risk management and some governance. So for example, if you need to run a what if scenario, say your product owner gets hit by a bus and he's going to be gone for 3 months and then come back, what is that going to do to your January 1 go live date? And having a work plan that is linked together and fully resourced can be a great way of measuring the impact of an unfortunate issue or risk that might come up on your project. Okay, another pop quiz. Which one of these things does not belong in integrated scheduling in general? You've got a project timeline with start dates, end dates, and milestones. The work necessary to complete the project deliverables. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Rochelle. The costs, resources, and dependencies associated with each task, a variance report to the project sponsor, or the team members that are responsible for each task. Which one of those does not belong? There are 5 choices. And I'm going to give you until the clock turns 12:18 to quickly put in your thoughts. Again, the context is an integrated master schedule. Okay, Rochelle, where'd we land? Just give us the winner.
Sure. So the winner is a variance report to the project sponsor, and then the runner-up by a small margin. Oh, now we have tie for runner-up by a small margin is costs, resources, dependencies associated with each task, and team members that are responsible for each task.
I love that. And I'd love to hear someone who voted for cost, resources, and dependencies associated with each task to comment either in the chat or come on camera here for a minute and talk about why you thought that one didn't belong. And this isn't to poke fun at anyone. It's a perfectly valid perspective. Anyone? Be brave. Tell me it's because you don't ever want to put costs in a work plan.
I don't ever want to put costs in a work plan.
Thank you, Rochelle. I suspect that's why that one got any votes at all. But I do want to, I think it's just a good conversation to have. I personally have never put costs in a work plan. So, it's not something you have to do. So one part of these pop quizzes are just to kind of get you thinking outside the box, and maybe you'll discover how flawed our thinking is. So now I'm going to introduce you. Puneet is on screen here and he's ready to present, and he's actually going to show you several layers of scheduling activity. And you are actually going to be learning from a master here, because Puneet is an expert in integrated master scheduling. He's not only going to show you how he constructs a work plan for a project, but how he would do it a couple of different ways to still come up with an integrated schedule. So I'm watching the counter here, and I know we have at least 57 people on this call. I challenge you to stick with this because I think it's going to be enlightening for all of us, even those of us who consider ourselves to be veterans when it comes to integrated scheduling. So Puneet, would you take it over at this point, please?
Sure. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you. And welcome, everyone. I'm hoping the conversation that I would have some minutes to spend on to would be useful. Some of these things may be that the activities that you're already completing, and you've already completed those, and some information might come along that you might find useful. So let's see what we can achieve here. Now, as we look at these examples, something that I'm going to start sharing in a second, we should also think about what Stacy just shared a minute back. What is a work plan? It is a relationship of all the activities and the tasks that are required to complete the project. We also need to think about it as it's only the activities that are required for the project, nothing beyond that. It's a holistic view of what it is going to take to get the project done. And there are different ways to build that schedule, build that work plan that shows you all the activities, their relationship, their dependencies, in a way that if the activities are not progressing according to the plan, what does it mean to you and what actions, decision, choices, options you may need to think about. So let me start by sharing my screen. And as you look at the screen that Stacy has, there are a couple of options. One that I will first start with is a single work plan that contains everything, every task you need for the project. Then we'll go to another option where the task may be broken down into different schedules. And please use the chat feature if you have any questions that you want to come across. I'm sure Stacy and Rochelle will help me pause the conversation and come to the questions. And if somebody could confirm that you're able to see the project schedule that I'm sharing with some collapsed tasks on the left-hand side.
We can see.
Thank you. So what we have, this is an example of a work plan for a project, simplified version, where all tasks from all the vendors are contained in one work plan. In this example, we have assumably two vendors. One vendor is completing your business requirements, and the second vendor will be completing your technical design. For the project as a whole, as you being the agency assigned project manager, you need to have a full view of start to finish, where your project activities start with defining the vendor contract activities and coming to a conclusion who your vendor will be and they have joined to start the project. So you might start with publishing the RFP, give it some time for the vendor responses. You have a team assigned to review the responses. Based on the response analysis and scaling the results, you invite some vendors to do a demonstration for their product, make a final determination, you have a contract finalized, and the vendor joins. As I'm pointing through these tasks, you can see that there are some resources that are assigned to the tasks as responsible and actors on those activities. The second activity you might have in your project as the vendor contracting is getting into shape, that you and your team are starting to establish project management plans, the governing documents, the control document that you will use throughout the duration of the project to drive the activities and to provide the management governance around those activities. So you may have project management plan, vendor management plan, change plan, training plan, OCM, scope management. And again, it's an example. Depending upon the scope of the project and the complexities around it, you may have more or less distinct planning documents. However, as many documents you might have, you should account for all the activities it will take to complete the tasks, complete the deliverable, complete the management plan, all the way from draft to approval. So you have a draft of the management plan, you go work with the teams, get their input, prepare the document. Once it is ready at the team level, you would most likely reach out to your leadership for their review and feedback. Once the leadership has had a chance to review it, they would provide you feedback, which may require some updates or tweaking to your document. Project manager and the team would make those updates. Once the updates are complete, they are sent over for approval. And at some point after all the review feedbacks are accepted, you have an approved project management plan. And as I was saying about based on the complexity of the project, you may have more than one iteration of review and update, either within the team or with your leadership. So that depends upon how complex you may have. Okay, so these are the tasks that you as project team are doing in parallel to maybe as the vendor contracting is being finalized, you have some control documents ready. Now, with your vendor being on board, now you're starting the activities with the vendor, executing your first deliverable of business requirements. As we said, it needs to have all the tasks required for the project. So if we look at the business requirements deliverable, not only you would have tasks in a sequence, and when I say sequence, I mean including their dependencies and relationships to complete the activities. And also once the deliverable is complete from a vendor perspective, you still have activities to review, provide feedback, maybe more than one cycle of review and feedback, and ultimately reach the approval. And sometimes we call it done. So at this point, task number 35, we can say our business requirements are done. Okay. I'm going to spend another minute on showing what these dependencies mean. And it will depend upon which tool you may be using. You don't have to use Microsoft Project. It's just a tool that I'm more familiar with, and I'm using it for this example. What we are reflecting here is there is a dependency of task 25 to start task 26, which means our planning says we will complete the initial discovery sessions before we go to execute deep dive sessions. And that's how the relationship continues. As an example only, your project, your requirements may allow you to run some sessions in parallel, some with 5-day offset or different mechanism of relationship. Similar detail you may have laid out for the task for the second vendor, giving you the deliverable technical design, where different team members may be engaged on the activities. You have technical design and architecture draft with the technical team and the vendor. You may also have security requirements that work with your project CISO. You prepare the blueprint and the technical architecture, goes through the review. Once the review is complete, you apply those updates. And again, task 42, vendor might believe that they have completed the activities they are responsible for, technical design and deliverable is ready. However, as an agency PM, there is a task we have for reviewing the deliverable, providing any feedback for updates, and ultimately providing an approval to the deliverable. And that is where, like I said, we reach the done state for the deliverable. So I'm going to take a 1 second pause, couple of seconds, see if there are any questions on the chat window. And while you are thinking through the questions, this is one example of a single work plan where you have tasks for your agency project as well as for all the vendors, one or more, completing one or many deliverables.
Stacy added a comment just to clarify that this first example is one single plan with all state and vendor tasks listed. It's an integrated project plan.
Yes. Thank you, Stacy. Okay, if there are no questions for now, I hope I didn't put everybody to sleep. I know it's lunchtime.
Are people able to add questions or access the chat feature? Is anyone using the Q&A option at the top? I prefer you use the chat feature, but want to make sure everybody's being heard. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to continue with the possibly second method of building your schedule. And generally, you will see that when you have a complex project with vendors who sometimes prefer to keep their task details in their own confined space. It's not about keeping anything confidential, but maybe their practices are that we will manage our tasks within our own team, and we will do a handshake of information with the agency project manager to make sure the agency PM has a full view of the schedule or the work plan and the dependencies. So in this case, maybe I am the technology vendor providing the deliverable named technical design. My task would possibly start with the day I have the final contract so that I have authority to start the work. As soon as I have authority to start the work, I will start scheduling work with the project team. And you might see the tasks are very similar. I will go through the draft of technical design and architecture. We'll review the security requirements, prepare the document architecture and blueprint, review with the CISO, review technical design with OCS, Office of Cybersecurity, maybe, finalize the technical design. And at this point, I as a technology vendor for this project, I would believe that I have completed my work. And in order to integrate my activities with overall project activities, there needs to be some level of connectivity between the two. So one simple mechanism I have used a lot in the past is called give and get. So vendor will have a milestone of give, and the agency project work plan will have a milestone of get. They should have the same name, so you have very easy way of connecting the two pieces together. And by connecting means once you have a completion progress on the give milestone, you can reflect that progress on the get milestone. And if the dates or the progress is different from the plan, your integrated schedule will show you the variance. So I'm going to switch over from this independent schedule of the technology vendor to the integrated schedule now and show you what I mean by having the milestones linked. So we go to integrated master schedule. Now in here, you will see the top tasks are still the same. Even if it is a separate schedule, I would still, as a project manager for the agency, I would have vendor contacting tasks that I'm tracking. I would also have tasks to prepare and track all the project management plans and control documents. I would, however, not have the detailed tasks for the technology vendor or application vendor because these vendors are tracking their tasks in their own independent work plan. But I would have a linkage, as I was referring to, between gives and gets. So I'm going to flip back to the technology schedule where we had a milestone called give, submit technical design for approval. I should have a matching milestone here where is get technical design for review. This is my linkage. If the progress on the give task changes, the progress on the get task will also change. And accordingly, I will have a flow through for the future task if there is an impact, if there is a change. It's great if I'm coming in sooner, I'll have a deliverable potentially complete sooner. But if it is late, I would most likely have a delay. The other thing to think about is, and we'll go a little more into resource allocation after a couple of slides, is it's not only just a factor of time, it's also a factor of resource availability. We know we don't have unlimited resources. You may have planned and allocated a resource to be available on a certain date to complete the review and provide the feedback. If the tasks are running late, that special resource, the subject matter expert, may already have been assigned to complete another activity, either on this project or on a different assignment within the agency. So when you have the schedule with tasks linked, resources assigned and allocated by dates and durations, you have multiple factors to show you what a delay might mean to your project as a whole. So what we have here is you get the review, you get the deliverable for review, and you execute the same tasks that the project team will review, provide the feedback to the vendor. Based on the feedback, vendor will make some updates, corrections, and resubmit for approval. There may be one or more cycles of review and approval, review and feedback. And at some point, you will reach the milestone for done, deliverable is accepted. Similar cycle will be for the business requirement deliverable by the second vendor. So that's the second example. If we look back on the slide that Stacy was sharing, there are multiple ways. There are also ways where you can actually import or embed the sub-schedules or sub-work plans into one master plan. So depending upon the tool you may be using, there are different capabilities that are available in those terms. So at this point, again, I'll take a pause and see if there are any questions in the chat window that I can answer, or somebody may want to unmute and ask the questions for.
Sure. So Jerry asked the question, is that an automatic update from the give and get or a manual update on your integrated schedule? And Stacy responded, it could be configured both. I think in this case, Puneet, you're doing a manual update.
Yes, you're right. Thank you, Rochelle. This particular example that I have is based on manually integrating and updating the tasks across the schedules, depending upon the capabilities of the tool you may be using. For example, if you have Microsoft Project Server, then you can integrate the schedules dynamically and will create an automatic update and create your variance reports.
Thanks, Puneet.
Okay. Now stop sharing. Back to you, Stacy.
All right. Okay. So we are going to briefly talk about resource allocation. So resource allocation, stated simply, is where you would go into your work plan and have a task there, create a test plan, and you would attach a resource to it. In my experience, it's easy to do, but also complex and requires a certain amount of upkeep, and leads to terms like resource leveling and resource smoothing, which scare the holy living crud out of a lot of project managers. So there's absolutely no shame if you don't do it, but here are some of the pros and cons, right? The pro is it really is easy to type a name into the resource table and select that resource as you're planning your tasks. There are a lot of different options available to you. You could schedule by individual name, you could schedule by team. I'm sure there are thousands of methods. Having your resources loaded, though, does give you a lot more confidence about what your critical path is, because it will be driven by activities that are linked together and based on available resources that you know are committed to your work, your project. And having a resource loaded schedule could, in theory, this is what they say, encourage your team members to perform at the top of their game and be innovative in using the limited resources they have at their disposal because they know that all resources are accounted for. Now, this method also allows you to highlight for yourself as the project manager where a project may need additional resources or you make other trade-offs that are necessary for your project. On the con side, and I probably should have made these lists equal, it can be tedious, right? People change over, they leave, they come, it can be challenging. If you do it wrong, then it makes your plan pretty suspect, right? And you spend a lot of time chasing your tail or trying to understand why the reports are telling you what they're telling. And it may be because you forgot to say that, Stacy was available 40 hours a week that week. And, if you miss a simple detail like that, on the other hand, that is what helps you understand where your resources are. And sometimes a certain amount of tail chasing can be beneficial. But it may feel like there's little room for error. And I know that that's frustrating to a lot of folks. And it may feel pointless if you simply do not have enough resources to apply to your project. And I know that in the state environment, in the public sector environment, we very often are looking at pulling off projects with insufficient resources. So, what do you do as a project manager? Unfortunately, we don't have the answer to that particular question for you today, but acknowledge that it can feel powerless or disempowering to try to do resource leveling when you know you don't have enough resources. So, quick question here for the group, and I'll pause. I know that there are a lot of different ways to do resource allocation, and Puneet is going to show you an example here in the next couple slides, but are there other ways of doing resource allocation that you have found that work for you for your purposes that you'd like to share with this audience? Okay. So here's a slide just to kind of tee up Puneet's demo on the next slide. There are a lot of different ways to do resource allocation, and there are trade-offs and pros and cons for each one. But let's say you're running a project and you've got Sally dedicated full-time, Stan, he's the server guy, he's just going to be available to do work here and there. You've got Dinesh, your analyst, but he's only available 8 hours a week, and Felipe is only available 25% of the time. And Grace, your SME or DBA, is available 30 hours a week. So you take all of those estimates and you would plug them into your resource table. Which again could be Project, Jira, Smartsheet, Excel, any tool you like. But as you attach those resources at their stated availability and capacity, you then can produce a schedule that either alerts you to a massive gap in resources or gives you a really reliable go live date, and you're going to hit that January 1. All right. A lot of people also use on the right there a freestanding capacity planner or resource allocation spreadsheet. And I noticed Mark in the comments said, I use a resource always allocated fully for a task. It identifies the who, not the how much, which certainly, a lot of people do that as well. I think what you're saying, Mark, is that you use the resource column as almost like a task owner and not is this person available for 16 hours to do this task? Or maybe both. So again, there's so many different ways to do it, but what I'd like to do is invite Puneet to give you a little demo of how he does resource allocation. And again, this will be a very basic level task. I'm mindful of time here. It's 12:43, but we've got about 6 or 7 minutes to finish all of this up. And Puneet, if you would take over the steering wheel and show us how to do resource allocation.
Let's give it a shot. Thank you, Stacy. So as Stacy mentioned for everyone, there are many different ways of handling your resource allocation. And like Mark, you mentioned that depending upon the complexity of the project and how scarce your resource may be and how many SMEs you may have available, you may assign the task to identify who is doing it, not necessarily taking to the granularity of how many hours you need in a given week and how many hours the resource may be available. So again, as a basic example level, the way I have mostly used is assigning the work more at a team level and not necessarily at an individual person level. And what it helps us is to handle, minimize our rework when the resource changes. We know IT projects we have done in the live project, people move on from one role to another within the project, within the agency, or even across the agencies, and they go to different organizations. And if you have specific names, you might have a little more rework than otherwise to make those all the reference changes. For the past, you keep it. For the future tasks, you change it, and things like that. So the other benefit of doing it at a team level is you can do it based on the capacity of the team. So in here, as an example, I have a project team available at 400%, which means equivalent of 4 FTEs. Behind the scene, I don't necessarily, as a project schedule person, may not have to be worried about, is it 8 FTEs at 50% availability or 4 at full time, or if 7 are same, one has changed. My focus is the work required sufficient to be met by 4 FTE availability when the task is in execution? Okay, so we can have it any different ways, like I said, but for this, we'll focus on a project team at 400% and maybe project technical team, which is available 300%. The reason these are red is because I have built in an over allocation example here to show you what it means and how do you see that resource information and what can you do once you know where the issues might be coming from. And as you have done the schedule management and project management, this is an art. This data is not direct science. It is how you use this information to take the next step, to make the determination of what is the right next step to do for the success of the project. So switching over to the Gantt chart view, the task view we looked at, I did share that we have project resources assigned in the resource name. Some are assigned at a percentage level as well, which you can do. However, if I assign the resource to be at a work level more than they are available to the project, this tool, Project Schedule by Microsoft Project Schedule, starts showing a red indicator on the left. Again, you can be using any tool, any mechanism of comparing hours available versus hours assigned. For here, we are using this tool which shows the red indicator, which means there is an over allocation. To see the over allocation, I can go to a resource usage tab or view. And as I expand the resource and the task and the available dates that this person is assigned to, it will start narrowing down to somewhere towards the late October, early November timeframe. I'm expecting project team to work on 80 hours. However, their availability is short by 8 hours. So they're assigned a work and they're over allocated as well. I can keep narrowing down to the task level. So this is project team as a whole. While as I go one level deeper, I see this is the task, project review of business requirements. So now as a project manager, I know I have a shortfall of 8 hours. What do I do next, right? That's the decision I need to make based on the options available. Is there a way I can get one more resource? What if I reduce the allocation to 32 hours and extend this task by 3 days? What is the downstream impact? Can I absorb that delay? Can I get new resource? So these are the options that you would think through. However, whatever tool you may be using to track the allocation and availability, that variance is a data feeder to you to say, I may have an issue which may impact my project. Now I need to reach out to powers to be the resource manager, the IT team, the project leadership, steering committee, project executive sponsor to show here is the issue, here are the options. You need to approve which option should I move forward with. I need to go with some pros and cons. I need to go with the options and analysis. But this tool, or whichever tool you may use, if you are assigning resources to a degree, it starts giving you a data feeder into where you might have an issue in the future that you may need to tackle now. That was the minute or two that I wanted to share.
Thank you, Puneet. That's a great example.
Stopping.
Right.
Back to you, Stacy.
I keep going. Every time I go back to share my presentation, it's not in my list, so it takes just a moment. I apologize. Okay. So here we go. We're well on our way, getting through this. We're almost done. Just a quick recap, as Puneet said, you can do a lot with resource allocation data. Most importantly, you can discuss whether or not you have an issue and what you want to do with it. Work with resource managers to come up with more time. Or, you may want to contract and get a contractor in there to help you bridge your gap. So again, this is just to tantalize those of you who are super excited about scheduling and integrated scheduling. There are people out there who do scheduling full-time, right? On a really big project, you might have one or two people that sit and do schedule maintenance and analysis all day long. Well, what do they do, and what can we learn from them or aspire to do as project managers based on what we know of their job descriptions? So again, just a quick snapshot to give you some idea. People do schedule variance analysis and, some pretty sophisticated data analytics around schedule variances. What if scenarios? What if our product owner gets eaten by a shark? What will that do to our schedule? We can do more resource analysis. We can talk about our scheduling strategy and theory. And boy, if you want to get really deep into it, there's scheduling strategy. Can you imagine? But you can also use the data to help train all of the PMs on the program, use the different tools available to you to control the schedule, develop schedule standards, because again, the more you standardize inputs and outputs from your scheduling tools, the better your data is going to be. And then, of course, everyone's favorite, resource leveling, resource smoothing. And we didn't even talk much about taking a baseline. So that's going to be in the 201 session that we'll get to next year, right? One last poll to wake you up before we ask you to answer some questions. We are interested in what you think are the top skills for schedule management. And there's no wrong answer here, just a quick poll to get you thinking and talking. Which ones are your three? Hopefully we can pick three, right? And we're planning. Well, I guess I should give some thought to it here, but what are the top three skills? What do we have, Rochelle?
Oh, it looks like our top three are not sorted automatically for me. So let me double check.
Wouldn't that be
right
nice?
now,
Yeah.
while it's still going on, we've got the number one is planning. I've got organization and communications, both at 13%.
Right
the
on.
next one is scheduling at 15%. And then, so I think those would be the overall top three. Organization and communications tied for third, planning for first, and scheduling for second, for third. Second.
Yeah. And what really is the difference between planning and scheduling anyway, right? So it's just a fun poll. I think we actually have time for a few questions here, either of Puneet or project management partners. You've got Rochelle and I on the call. Any questions about integrated scheduling? Any thoughts about what you heard today? Anything shocking, surprising, and aha for anyone?
Hey, this is Sai from Gambling.
Hi,
This
Sai.
question is open to everybody. So the interesting thing is, Microsoft Project is great in creating a plan. What I found Microsoft Project is not that great is tracking the project while it's in flight and see the variance between the actual and the planned. So it'd be nice to kind of know how you guys handle the variance, especially if your project is in flight, to see what kind of shortfalls or even overachievement we have done in the project using Microsoft Project.
Yeah, so I don't know if Puneet, you have a rapid answer to that one. I think the question is, if you do have a baseline and your project is well underway, you can look at a view that will show you what your schedule variance is from when you took that initial baseline, right? And your question is, what do I do with that data? I see 50 tasks that got completed, 10 days after they should have been completed. What do I do with that data?
So Sai, that's a wonderful question. When you have a schedule, how do you figure out how you're performing against it? You start by, in at least Microsoft Project, you start by establishing a baseline. And once your baseline is established, you have baseline start and baseline finish columns pre-filled, you start tracking the actual progress. You may mark the task complete with the start and end date, which may be sooner than what you planned or later than you planned. And as your actual schedule starts filling in, the Microsoft Project will start calculating a finish variance. It will also calculate start variance, but I have used mostly a finish variance column to see whether I am overall ahead of schedule or behind schedule. And it also provides an ability to trace back where the variance is originating from by following the critical path. And as you follow through, again, you go into deeper and deeper analysis of how deep you want to go and how intricately your tasks are constrained and related with each other. You'll be able to find out this is the task that has caused the variance. And as you flow down from there, you can also possibly find out the task where there may be a slack, maybe an ability to slow that task down, move the resource from one place to another to fast track another critical path activities so that you can overall start shrinking the variance back to the plan. So that's a little bit of a next step review. And hopefully, Stacy, when you said we might have a scheduled 201 review sometime, I think that will be a wonderful topic for a future conversation to look at the baseline, the variances with the actual tracking, and how do you look at the critical path.
I think so too. I get excited about these weird topics, but I think that might just be me. So we're going to wrap up. We do usually put an evaluation link in the chat. You can tell us how we did today, where we fell short, what you'd like as part of the next 201 level presentation on integrated scheduling. We're grateful we had you all here today. Please join our Teams community. If you haven't already, you can claim PDUs for this hour and give our group here, WATEC MIPMCOP, rolls right off the tongue, a message and let us know how we can help or what you would like us to know based on today's presentation. Thank you again, everyone, for being here today and joining us and contributing, and hopefully it was helpful. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Thanks, Puneet.